Yeah, these guys were a master of their art, I'm telling you.
The Sergios.
All the time they spent in silent movies, that's what makes this... There we go. Oh, right off the back of the horse. Dead man walking.
We ain't walking anymore.
I love the names, too. Alberto Grimaldi.
Oh, yeah.
This reminds me of just being a kid, like, in the early 70s, sitting on a Sunday evening, watching some sort of spaghetti western on local TV.
I grew up with these, and then we would go out and play westerns all day long. We'd cut holes in blankets and run around with ponchos all day long.
Mine was Friday nights. I knew I was going to get to stay up late because these would come on after the news. And my dad would go in and make popcorn for us. And this was our Friday nights when I was like 8, 9 years old. It was awesome.
That is very cool.
I would not trade that for anything in the world.
Well, you know, thinking about how hard these would have been to make back then, because there's no... I mean, if you mess up, you're retaking it. You're not CGIing anything.
No.
So if you just haven't figured out what we're talking about spaghetti westerns.
That's right. The classics. The best of the classics. This one happens to be Fistful of Dollars. The music was great.
Oh, just awesome.
Yeah.
It fit everything just perfect.
I mean, it's just hard not to just stop and reverence and listen to that.
I can smell the popcorn almost. Get me a Coke, boy.
It's funny, too, because it's just subtle movements that they make in these. You know, like they show there's a part in here where the spur, he walks through the door and shoots and the spur spins.
Yes.
And then he shoots and hits the spur to stop it. And I'm like, oh, come on.
There is some suspension of disbelief in this, that's for sure. Suspension of reality.
That's very cool. I'll just back this down a little bit. We'll just let the noise in the background.
There you go.
But yeah, this was, we figured we'd follow up. We did the Kung Fu Theater one, and we enjoyed that. So we thought, you know what? Right up there with the Kung Fu Theater would be the Spaghetti Western. So here we are.
Well, it's funny what they come out of. You know, you had the golden era of Westerns from Tom Mix all the way up into the 50s. You know, that
Roy Rogers, Gene Autry.
Exactly. And what interests me the most about this, or what I take away from this, the difference between the two is the cynicism and the sinisterness of Westerns that were spaghetti Westerns as opposed to the very defined roles of good guy. You had John Wayne.
Sure. Always
the pure good guy, right? He's the older gentleman that's pure at heart. There's no malice in his heart. You know, he's the quintessential paladin good guy.
Well, he's definitely he's a guy with moral fiber,
right? That's
unquestionable.
And then you get spaghetti westerns, and you start finding heroes that are ambiguously moral and might have a questionable background,
which is probably more realistic, actually, to the
Westerns. That's what I think they were going for when they made this stuff.
They did have some unique qualities that they used for, I guess, you could tell a story about a character and not really that character wouldn't even have to speak.
Right.
There'd be like the shifty eyes.
You could almost watch these as a silent movie.
Yes.
Which is funny because that's where these guys got started with them. Sergio Leone's dad was a producer of silent movies, and his mother was an actress in the movies. So it's a natural progression for him to let that influence his style of movie making. Because another interesting thing about him is he went to school with Ennio Morricone.
Okay.
Which is the guy that did the music.
Right.
So these two grew up
together. They already knew each other. You know, when you've got that kind of bond, you're going to make something that's great.
And they grew up making movies. They made a lot of sword and sandal movies back in the day, back in Rome, where, you know, like Cleopatra and Antony and Alexander, all those kind of movies they made. So they had a lot of time to hone this silent movie craft. And I think it was the Good, the Bad, no, not Good, Bad, the Ugly. It was a Seven Samurai movie that he watched.
Right.
And then he watched Jujimbo, which is the other samurai movie that Kurosawa made. And it made him think of the Fistful of Dollars trilogy. Right. That's what he did. He started off of that. But you had mentioned earlier about the clean-cut cowboy from the American West.
Right.
If you notice, these are dirty, grimy people. The big difference is these people sweat and they're dirty. They're not the clean shirt with the flowers.
Right.
on it.
No, and they go in and they frequent whorehouses and they drink whiskey. And while Wayne did his own bit of drinking, you never saw him get sloppy drunk.
No.
These guys would get falling down drunk in this.
Sure.
You know, and that would not in the movie itself, but
Yeah.
that would be what the character would.
But
portray.
I would say, the portrayal in this kind of a campy movie was closer to reality.
Sure.
You see them sweat, you see them get dirty, you see them get roughed up. Whereas, like, if you watch the old Roy Rogers movies or the Tom Mix or any of the earlier westerns, it was a very
they never took a bullet. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, it was just nobody got dirty, nobody got mad. It was just so not realistic.
Well, it's funny because a lot of the westerns that you see a lot of the American iconic actors in actually spend a lot of time in the spaghetti westerns. Guys like Lee Marvin, Arthur Kennedy.
I was.
All these guys. I'm trying to think of a couple others.
Lee Van Cleef.
Lee Van Cleef was in there.
He was a bit actor before.
Sure.
Before this came along, this genre actually made Lee Van Cleef. That cemented him as a real actor.
Yeah, the angel eyes really
eyes.
set with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I saw just how many actors either got their start or showed up in these films, like Charles Bronson.
Yeah.
But Chuck Bronson turned them down at first. All the big name actors
They
were
did.
turning them down at first because they were like, "This is going to go nowhere. Nobody's going to want to see a western where the good guy is surly and
That's right.
whiskey drinking." That's how they got Eastwood. But once they figured out, okay, there's a formula here. When like the mid '60s and late '60s hits, they're like, "Holy crap, people are watching these things."
But there was I still go back to there was a more of a sense of realism applied to these movies,
Sure.
than previous westerns.
Well, I think they found that out once the actors start coming back saying, "Hey, you know what? This isn't a joke."
Right.
And so a lot of guys are jumping in, like John Ireland, and I'm trying to think of all the Arthur Kennedy and Alex Cord and all these other actors that were going over to be in these movies.
Yeah, they wanted to be in Europe after
Yeah,
that. After
right.
they saw the success, when the spaghetti westerns first came out, they were like dollar movies. Or today, it's
Yeah.
like nobody wanted, or B movies. Everybody was like, nobody's going to want to see this. And once they figured out that kids wanted to see real to life characters, they were like, they're on to something.
Now
over
with
there.
these actors too, is because of the filming location of these movies. I mean, they were filming in Italy?
Spain.
Yeah,
Spain,
mostly
Italy,
Italy.
yeah.
So the way that I heard some of these actors were saying is they never knew that if they would ever get another opportunity to go to these
Sure.
foreign lands. So that was part of the appeal of going there to film these movies, because it was an experience they couldn't guarantee that they would ever get
Sure.
again.
So the two places they shot, all the studio scenes were shot in Rome, because
Right.
that's where Leone spent most of his time. I forget what's called Cine something in Rome, Italy. So all the interior shots that they can shoot were there. All the exterior shots were shot in Spain because it looked a lot like Utah.
Right.
I think there was
Yeah.
only one Western that they may have shot in the United States, and it may have been Once Upon a Time in the West,
Right.
or something like that. But generally, all this stuff was shot over there, overseas.
Right.
And it's you get an actor that's trying to get some kind of credibility. Credibility in Europe is just as good as credibility in the United States at this time.
Those people pay their bills just like everybody else.
Oh, they were huge.
They were spending money on this stuff.
Well, they were huge celebrities. They loved having Americans come over there.
Right.
And these weren't like little guys. These were big dudes. Clint
Right.
Eastwood's 6'4"?
Yeah.
And you
He's
get all
tall
these
dude, 6'2",
you get all-
6'4", something like that.
You get all these actors coming over there. I mean, it brings notoriety, and it takes guys like Eli Wallach and all these other guys kind of closer to home.
Right.
It gets them to where they become a celebrity over there. Gives them more power when they come back over here, believe it or not.
Their resume building. So
Absolutely.
So when Sergio actually ended up with Eastwood, which wasn't his first pick, but he ended up with Eastwood, Eastwood was under contract for doing Rawhide.
Rawhide, yeah.
And
Rowdy
he
Gaines.
could not shoot movies here as a cowboy. That was in his contract. Rawhide had set it up.
Okay.
That's why he took the opportunity. He's like, I want to do more. And he looked at the script and he saw what kind of realism that Sergio was going for in his film. He's like, dude, I want to do that. And it really, when he got over there, he's like, we did things. This is out of Eastwood's own mouth. He's like, we did things that were just out of the box. People didn't do in normal westerns. He's like, I was digging it.
And it's funny because Leone wanted Henry Fonda
Yes.
to be in the series first.
That was the first pick, and then he went to Chuck Bronson.
Yeah, and then
Lee
Colburn,
Martin,
and
was
then
it-
Colburn.
was it
James
Colburn.
Colburn.
Yes.
Coburn.
James Colburn, because James Colburn made movies overseas
He did.
before a lot of people did. And because he was kind of a martial arts guy.
Right.
But what was really funny was after they saw Eastwood's success, guess what?
Yeah.
They
Hey,
all got in a movie together.
Exactly.
I mean, everybody was in Once Upon a Time in the West except Clint Eastwood. And all the guys that Leone wanted to get actually made that movie, which was kind of cool. I mean, you know, when you watch these, I mean, the cinematography is, I think, superior to a lot of early movies because they had to focus on subtle movements and intent instead of just speaking words.
Right.
I think one of my favorite line was in The Good and Bad and the Ugly when Tuco or Eli Wallach was in the bathtub, and this guy bounty hunter comes walking in and starts talking.
Yeah.
And he shoots him through the tub, and he goes, "Hey, when you come into a room, don't talk,
Shoot. You got to shoot. Shoot. Don't talk.
Yeah, there's some great lines that come out of that. I mean, you know, you just look at all the craft, and I mean, and Eastwood kind of progressed this into a lot of his movies moving forward. Not quite as good as the silent type screenplay, but they were
Right.
still good. High Plains Drifter,
Sure.
all those other movies. But you know, it's funny because when you look at the ensemble of the town, it's full of just people. It's just people that, like we were talking earlier, were gypsies,
Right.
didn't have jobs,
Right.
you know. And it's,
Well, and it's funny, they took gypsies, the Greek gypsies, they brought them in and used them as Hispanic people. They wanted to use them as
Right.
Mexicans, and that's what they did. They said, look, this is our Mexican populace, and you had these you know, people that looked like they were out of Mexico.
Right.
It was amazing.
and they built the sets, acted in the movie, and
Right.
then the sets were actually left there. There's a website you can go to and look at all these sets, what's left of them.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, you can go back and they take you to the camera's point of view, and they show you where these scenes were shot, which is a lot of fun to watch. And some of them are still there. I mean, a lot of it, some of them were attractions,
Yeah.
and one of them, I forget which movie, got moved to an island as a tourist attraction. It was it was the one where they painted the town red, Lagos. It was High Plains Drifter.
High Plains Drifter.
Yeah, that place actually got moved to a movie set somewhere. And,
Really?
yeah, they made a tourist town out of it, which was kind of cool. But no, I mean, you sit there. So this bar scene that we're looking at was used in The Three Amigos.
No
That's the
kidding. I did
same
not
bar.
know that. Now that's a piece of history I
That's
didn't
the
know.
same bar.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that was the one where they sang "My Buttercup." Remember that? And the German pilot come in.
Yes.
Yeah, and they thought they were the
I
Germans.
have not seen that movie in
Oh,
forever. I need
that
to go
movie
watch
is
that again.
so funny. I mean, you know, for a campy bunch of goofballs. I mean, you had El Guapo,
El
which
Guapo.
was everything was like the Sergio Leone westerns, except for these Three Amigos,
Right.
which were the American
It was
version of that.
And I would actually say that the Three Amigos looked like characters that came out of like the Tom Mix.
Absolutely.
Roy
That
Rogers.
That was the
Yeah.
idea. I think that was the
whole
concept. they were
idea.
trying to
I never
hit.
even thought about it because I mean I'm so not into westerns, but
Yeah.
I mean this is
Oh, that's
this
my
was
favorite genre.
Yeah, yeah. About it,
We're
about
leaving
it-
Graham
now,
in the dust on this one. Ken and I were salivating at the mouth.
Here I
again
look at it
Graham's
as,
like, "Eh."
this is like the way I look at the spaghetti westerns is it's the American samurai, and that's how I look at it. So,
And you know what's funny though is you're not too far offline because the Seven Samurai really got it all started. The Magnificent Seven. I mean, one of the most iconic westerns ever made was based on that samurai
exactly.
story. You know, it was instead of cattle barons and bad guys, you know, being law dogs, these guys came in and saved a town from a Mexican bandito, which is probably what happened on the border a lot.
right.
Probably
you
more
had-
often than not.
Remember the Wild Bunch?
Yeah.
That was based on basically the same kind of story. I mean, there's a lot of movies that are the good guy that knows he's not going to make it through to the end, saving a town of good people. I mean, that's the thing that appealed to me was that aspect of it. You had a clearly defined good guy, and you had a clearly defined bad guy, and then you had some movies, well, say like Tombstone. Tombstone's a great example. Okay, so Wyatt Earp and his brothers were lawmen, but they also made money on prostitution and gambling.
You
so-
can hear both sides of the
Yeah.
argument. You know, and of course, movies have been made to display both sides of the argument,
yeah.
whether it was the Clantons or the Earps that were right in the scenario.
Oh, yeah, and it's an iconic movie for sure. What I think is funny is the connection Wyatt Earp and Tombstone both to Sergio Leone westerns, because the one thing that was interesting about it was when Costner was writing the screenplay for Wyatt Earp, he wanted it to be his version of Lonesome Dove.
Right.
He wanted it to be a multiple-part mini-series.
Yeah.
And then when Kevin Jarre and the guys wrote Tombstone, they were all right around the same time, and it became a competition. It was really interesting because I knew some of the costumers and I know some of the stunt guys from that movie. And all the costumes that they were having made for Wyatt Earp got lost at sea. Literally. That's why the costumes look so crappy in the final production. They had to go back into the archives and the storage areas of these old spaghetti westerns and pull them all over and try to make them fit.
Wow.
That would have been funny to see Earp in that poncho that Eastwood's always wearing, the Mexican. Here comes Earp with the flat brim hat. And
I will say, all in all, I think Costner actually did a good movie trying to get it there, but he just rushed it to production.
I think the acting was good. I think his portrayal of Earp was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the portrayal of Doc Holliday by... Oh, not Randy Quaid, but his brother
Dennis Quaid. Yeah,
I couldn't think of his name, but I thought their performances were great. I loved them.
Oh, they did, and then you go to Val Kilmer. It's hard to say. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, which one was better, Kilmer or Quaid?" Well, I actually thought Quaid was more historically correct.
I do too,
but I thought Kilmer was entertaining as hell.
Yes.
Well, so I don't recall ever seeing the one with Costner in it.
Yeah,
or
it was long. It was like a 3.5 hour movie.
The character of Doc Holliday between the two. So in real life, was Doc Holliday more like what Val Kilmer portrayed, or the other?
No, I'm going to say
it was more like Quaid.
Everything I've read, Quaid was more along the... Kilmer was very flashy. Kilmer brought a lot of Top Gun with him.
Okay, so I was going to say, so Kilmer's Doc Holliday was playing Kilmer.
It was entertainment.
Yeah, he was playing, what's his name, Ice? Was it Iceman from Top Gun? He was a lot of Iceman. He had a lot of Iceman going on, but he was good. I mean, he was cleverly cool. And he was a very well-educated, very polished guy, where Holliday, well-educated, polished, but ill.
But most movie watchers who've ever seen those, they'll recall Val Kilmer's.
They will.
Sure.
Well, that movie was seen by more people than... Like Ken said... I think they beat them by about 6 months to the theater.
I want to be your Huckleberry.
Yeah.
Well, and they ran into a lot of problems with Tombstone, too. When they fired the original... Kevin Jarre got fired.
Yeah.
Right.
They brought in George Cosmatos, which is a Greek producer who was influenced by spaghetti westerns. So there's actually a couple interesting things about the change of production. Because this is literally Kurt Russell's baby. He was going to do a trilogy. He was going to do Tombstone. Then he was going to do one called Dodge City, which talks about Doc and Wyatt meeting back in the Old West. And then the third one was either going to be called Nome, Alaska, and they had another name for it. But anyway, they were going to do a trilogy. And when it all fell apart with Jarre's departure, and then I think he subsequently died later, and brought Cosmatos in, they had to force Elliott to finish the movie, first of all.
So they're trying to make a Western franchise.
Yeah, so what Cosmatos did is he came in and he changed the storyline. He goes, look, the red sashes, that was his idea.
Yeah.
That was gangs, that was Crips versus Bloods in his mind. We're going to have the lawmen dressed like Undertakers, and we're going to have the bad guys wearing these red sashes. And the casts were fantastic. I mean, you had Powers Booth and Michael Biehn and Stephen Lang. You had some damn good actors in this movie.
Yeah.
But it was not historically correct, and it wasn't quite.
It was entertainment. I think it was
one of the best entertainments.
Right. I think it was entertainment as opposed to
factually correct.
Right. And whereas the Costner movie was more factually correct, probably not quite as entertaining. But I enjoyed it. I think if you're a fan of westerns, you can watch the Costner rendition and really enjoy it.
I haven't seen too many bad westerns. So.
I would say, being a history buff, that if I had my preferences of which movie I want to watch, I'm going to want to watch the one that's factually correct.
Sure. And it's funny because you get a little bit of that in both. You get more in the Wyatt Earp one. The thing about Tombstone that I really thought was cool was the portrayal of the town. Because I've been to Tombstone like multiple times. I even sat in. They do every year. They have a trial at Schifflin Hall,
right,
where they actually retry the Clanton, McLaury, and Earp thing. They do it quite often. As Western magazine writers do it. And when you sit in there and see these people passionately fighting out this court case on how the facts of the events really happened,
is that Arizona?
That's in Arizona.
Yeah, because I remember when I was stationed there, that that was like one of the huge
attractions
that people would leave freaking base to go to those.
Well, yeah, you had
towns.
Bisbee, Tombstone, you had all that. Bisbee was really big too.
I remember one
especially
of
if you have a motorcycle.
One of them was like a hippie place that our command would say, "Stay away from this place. They don't like military."
Well, it's funny because contrasting back to these early westerns, these spaghetti westerns, I think they had more depth than the modern movies. I really do, because you're sitting there and you're seeing a producer focus on the eye line. They're focusing on the fidgeting hand. I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
They're telling a story without words.
That was the aspect that I liked about when you look at it from the artistic and creative aspect or viewpoint. The things that they would concentrate on that help you define the character, his little nuances.
So a secondary or a tertiary of that's interesting is they all spoke these different languages. You had Germans, French, Italians. All these actors that's one of the reasons he did what he did. Is none of them spoke the language. They couldn't speak English. They all spoke different languages.
Yeah, during shooting, you're right.
Exactly.
They did.
Right,
so that's why you see so much emphasis on facial movement, hand movement. It's more of a character actor than a speaking role. You're not going to find big long speeches in here, and that's why.
Because I do remember I watched the interview with Clint Eastwood about this, and I remember him bringing up the fact that the voice track that they would use to go back over the movie because of the language that you were talking about.
Right. They actually didn't record voice in this.
Right.
When they were on screen, they were not recording voice most of the time.
But he was saying that they were I guess, with however many of these spaghetti westerns that he did, and just through conversation with other people who did it, that for some reason the industry over there would always misplace or lose the voice track, and they would have to
go back and do it again.
Do it again.
Yeah.
And you can so tell that they're overdubbed. It's like watching a Japanese movie. It's like, that's not what came out of that guy's mouth.
But that's what makes them so much fun, though.
Oh, absolutely.
We used to sit there and overdub them ourselves. We would sit there and just talk our own shit to these movies. We turn the volume off and make our own sign.
I do that with movies I watch now.
Oh, it's so much fun. And another interesting thing to Todd's point was that when they were composing the music, they would actually bring a few musicians out, and play the music to get the actors to understand the scope and scale of what the movie was about,
and to play to the mood.
Which is very cool.
This is another thing that they did. We're watching this on screen. If you look at how Indio, talking about the reality of how these people were in the Old West. Take Indio, for instance. They kind of allude to the fact that he used drugs.
Yeah.
Like
they did
peyote or whatever it was that made him wild-eyed and crazy. They never actually show him. They knew they would never get that past American censors, but they wanted to allude to the fact that these bad guys were even quirkier than the good guys.
Sure.
They always had some weird, twisted something that kind of give you an idea as to what made them bad guys. They weren't villains for the sake of being villains, for just greed only.
They just didn't act normal.
Right. This guy had brain damage. That's why he acted the way that he did. There was something outside of the fact of the normal greed that you got out of the clean-cut westerns.
Okay, all right.
Well, and that's a very good point, because a lot of these guys, you got to remember, a lot of these movies were made post-Civil War.
Right.
Or the storyline is activities post-Civil War. And we just got through talking about a series called, what is it, Hell on Wheels?
Yeah, yes.
So we watched Hell on Wheels, and it was about the railroad moving to the west. And there was a character in that movie. What was it? The German guy. What was his name?
What are you talking about?
The big bald bad guy in that one. That ended.
Swede?
The Swede. So if you look at the Swede, the Swede was an immigrant that came to the United States.
But I'm Norwegian.
Norwegian, yeah. So he comes to the United States, and he gets captured. He's a Union soldier, gets captured, and he survives Andersonville.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Andersonville,
And he becomes kind of a baseline cannibal in many ways. And he's just like totally lost the shit. The cheese is slid off his cracker.
Wow.
And so he does all these crazy, insane things. And as they build his backstory, they fill it in with all the atrocities that happened during
Civil War
in Andersonville. So when you look at the bad guys over here, a lot of these guys basically spent time in prison somewhere, or they were captured by Indians and treated whatever way they was, and they come out dented.
They give them a reason for being.
Andersonville was the Auschwitz supposedly of
it was
of the
horrible.
South. Right?
Yeah, and so these movies, they kind of pick up on the motivation with these actors. And what I love about these old westerns is all the little things, like the guy rubbing his chin and the guy
facial expressions.
Yeah, all the facial expressions when something happens.
That's the storytelling, man.
is.
I'm telling you, that's the real story.
And that's the genius between these. That's the genius behind these movies.
And that would be something that they kind of took from the silent movie era.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so, what I also like about the fact that they use a lot of local people is they didn't have to undo acting school.
Right.
They didn't go to Giorgio Barbona's School of Acting. They showed up, swung a hammer for about 2 weeks, and they said, "Here, put this on. Okay, stand here, stand there." And so these people worked, and they were like glad to be in these movies. So guess what? You're getting effort. They're not worried about air-conditioned trailers at this point. They're not worried about green M&Ms versus brown M&Ms. They want to be on film so that everybody back home can see them in this movie. I guarantee all these hundreds of people on here were celebrities when they went back home.
Sure. You know, they lived the rest of their life getting a free cheeseburger or whatever it was, a free slice of pizza, wherever it was they lived.
I mean, this stuff is just fantastic. I wish you guys can see some of this stuff. It's great.
One of the last things that I noticed about these movies is that when you look at how even the extras lived. Take like the Django series, the Django movies that came out.
Oh, the most recent ones?
Well, no, not the most recent ones.
Those were terrible.
No, I'm talking about the Django movies from let's say the late 60s.
Okay.
So it was almost kind of like a horror film if you think about it. The music that was the music that they put in that movie, it's got a different tone to it than even these earlier ones. They wanted to make it seem like death was around every corner. They killed people all the time. I mean, just these random folks would get shot that you wouldn't expect to get shot.
Wow.
And actually, the West was like that. There was a lot of Westerns there was one called Conager that Sam Elliott did that was really good. Him and Catherine Ross made a movie. And it was for Turner Networks. It was in the maybe in the 80s when they made it. Yeah.
Because
when TNT rolled out all those movies.
Yep.
And it was a simple thing. Like this guy was moving out west with his family, and he was going to go ride to town to get some cattle, and he got killed on the way and never came home. So she had to make her life in the desert with the Indians without a husband until Conager showed up. So yeah, it was they take a lot of these aspects and put them in these movies.
To my point, listen to the music that they're playing right there, that pipe organ music.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's something out of a Alfred Hitchcock movie or something.
Well, they're in a church.
I know.
They're killing people in a church wholesale.
Well, first of all, that's something else that you didn't see.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame music.
Yeah.
So that shit right there, just literally just like the way he carried that gun. So nonchalant over his shoulder, like I'm not a threat, and bam, what's he do? He kills the guy.
Right.
I mean, that's cool.
You know, that's something else that stuck with Europeans is they used a lot of iconic Catholic
imagery.
Catholic imagery. That's what I'm trying to spit out here. It's Catholic imagery. They used a lot of churches, a lot of graveyards, crosses. Everything that they showed kind of revolved around the mortality of what the Catholic Church teaches. I think that was what really attracted Europeans to this genre, especially.
But also, too, a lot of the missions settled areas.
Yeah.
Many, many years before Western expansion.
Right.
So you basically had missions established along El Camino Real all the way through the Old West, and they were set there to establish schools.
Sure.
To educate the Spanish people that were living in the area. So, yeah, these buildings, once the Catholics moved out, they became basically abandoned fortresses for these guys. So everybody had a place like a watering hole to go to.
Sure.
To hang out. So, yeah, these churches provided a lot of texture.
Right.
To the
it was realism. It was realism, and I think it was a draw to the European community to see these movies.
Sure,
because Europeans flocked to these; they loved them.
Oh yeah. Well, when you see all the things that they put in these movies that are American, that's what draws them in. I mean, because their life has to be mundane. I mean, things don't change for hundreds of years there.
That's true.
You know, then all of a sudden these Americans come in, and guess what? Stuff follows them there, and it stays and it sticks.
It's interesting. Some of the with my background, I see some of the industry that spawned out of it. You take Uberti Firearms.
Oh, yeah.
That was actually spawned because of spaghetti westerns. The guys that made the guns for the spaghetti westerns turned around and formed a company called Uberti that now makes replica firearms of the 1800s.
I do like the Uberti.
Yeah, David
products.
David Pedrusoli, Filippietta,
Yeah.
and Uberti all were making reproduction firearms based off of the early movie. Think about it.
That's how they got their start.
Sure, the spaghetti westerns span from 1919 to 1978.
Right.
Now I will say
That's
this,
a long damn time.
My lever action rifle is one of my favorite firearms. I will
Sure.
say that.
Dude, they're cool. There is no doubt about it.
So what's that movie that Daniel Craig made? It was a western with aliens. Was
Aliens versus Cowboys, I think.
Okay, so that honestly
Or Cowboys versus, I might have it
was
backwards.
originally supposed to be a spaghetti western written years ago.
Really?
It was after the day the Earth stood still. When that
Okay.
movie came out, they literally were going to make a western in Sergio Leone style. And then that
No
movie just
kidding.
got fast forwarded up into 2000s with Daniel Craig. I mean, can you imagine seeing something between Godzilla type cinematography and an old spaghetti western?
Dude, if you
Cowboys
could
and
that
throw,
would have been funny,
Cowboys
man.
and Indians versus Godzilla.
and if you could throw some
That would
Planet,
be great.
if you could throw some Planet of the Apes in there, that would
Yeah.
just be top notch, dude.
Who doesn't like seeing a monkey with a cowboy hat on?
And a 6-gun.
Well, we've already seen one with an AK-47. What they can do
Damn,
with that,
you
so
damn dirty apes.
that would be too much fun. But no, these are just. There's so much going on in these though that every time you watch them, you see something a little different.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at all the little kids running around. They probably got paid a popsicle or a sandwich. Or
Yeah, yeah.
They probably didn't get paid shit
tells,
for that.
That tells us a lot about the
Child labor laws over there?
well, that and the exchange of commerce there.
Oh, for sure. Well, I
that's
guarantee SAG hates the shit out of these guys.
Well, that was another reason for filming over there, is they could film stuff that the AMA would not let them film here.
Sure.
The American Movie Association wouldn't allow,
okay.
like in gunfights, they wouldn't allow the other person seen getting shot. Things of that nature. Like they wouldn't show like the bullet impact.
Really?
Yeah, whereas they would in these movies.
Yeah, they struggled. There was a lot of that, but it's funny because the animals were another thing too.
Yeah.
But now Clint Eastwood, him and Eli Wallach almost got killed in The Good and Bad and the Ugly. There was a few of those stunts that went bad.
Really?
And there's a little clip somewhere in one of the vignettes that talk about that. They damn near killed.
They
Clint
crashed
Eastwood.
a bunch of horses over
They
there,
did.
that's for
yeah,
sure.
horses, and then also, well, you know what's funny though? That's where the fake horse comes from too.
Yeah.
The cinema, the fake horses that were used falling off cliffs and stuff like that. These were all Italian and Spaniards making these,
Right.
and that's where they don't make them in the U.S. They were importing them in. It came from these guys.
Yeah, because if you're awfully close to a region that actually considers that a delicacy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and
I was going to say the glue factory, but that's even better, Graham.
after we're done riding, guess what our lunch is?
Yeah.
Napoleon, go get the horse. We're going to eat tonight.
No, it's funny because the craft and the resources is absolutely amazing, isn't it? I mean, when you look at all the stuff that's there, hell, they made it all there. They didn't have to import
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? No Chinese
Great
craft here.
craft. No, great craftsman.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
And they had all the seamstresses you can get your hands on, and all these women with just the cleavage. I mean,
That's another thing they were having a hard time getting away
Yeah,
with.
but the Italian movies,
but that's
man.
also that's part of their culture too.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Where it's not stigmatized there
It's not
as it is
taboo.
here. Yeah.
Which I think is really funny because, and all these shopkeepers and all these bar guys look the same in all the movies,
They all wear the same apron.
and they're the odd little David Dinklage or whatever his name
Right.
characters running around there.
Like Oompa Loompas.
Yeah, this stuff is fun. Like I said, you can just sit back and just watch these over and over again and find something new every time.
It is funny that the characters they're all beta male types. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. The whole beta male thing is just that's an interesting thing we'll save for another discussion for sure. But yeah, it's clearly the macho He-Man establishment for sure.